Okay. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I don't have any condolences, but what I'd like to do is just have a moment of silence for our veterans and first responders who have passed. So if we could have a moment of silence, that would be great. Thank you. Okay, pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law C-30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Bridgewater Town Council will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. There will be no in-person attendance permitted. Citizens who wish to tune in to the meeting may do so via Facebook Live. Okay, we don't have any minutes to approve. We don't have any announcements. We don't have any proclamations. We have citizens open forum. Are there any citizens who would like to come up and speak? What I'd like to remind people is if you could keep it to 3 minutes. And this is an opportunity for citizens to address the council, but we will not engage in any back and forth. Are there any citizens who would like to step up? And I'll leave it up to you. I can only see 9 people.
I do not see any raised hands. And nobody's chatted, so nope, I see nobody.
Okay. We don't have any appointments. According to AT&T, it's 7:04, so I'm just going to pause a little bit here. Start the meeting at 7:05.
Mr. President, while we're waiting,
Yes.
I just want to thank you for waiting for the hour because you never know, somebody might want to come in. If they came in a little bit late, if we started early, you know, that's not cool. So I appreciate waiting.
Yeah, no problem. I try to keep to a time frame as best as possible. As long as people are, you know, looking at AT&T time, it's all good. All right, I have 7:05. I'd like to open the meeting at 7:05. This is in regards to Order O FY 21-008, transfer order, capital appropriation for Highway Barn. The Finance Committee met on July 20th, 2020 and voted 7-0 to recommend approval. At their meeting held on July 21st, 2020, the Budget and Finance Committee voted 3-0 to recommend approval. This measure has been duly advertised in the enterprise and on the town's website for a public hearing. The measure may be finally considered upon receipt of the Finance Committee's disposition and conclusion of this hearing. With that being said, I will ask, are there any general questions from the public?
I'm not seeing any raised hands.
Okay. Is there anyone from the public speaking in favor of the order?
No raised hands.
Okay. Is there anyone from the public speaking in opposition of the order?
No raised hands.
Okay. Are there any questions from town councilors? Mr. Wood,
Thank you. I don't remember the last time this building was actually used. And I think it's been quite a while. Can we just get a quick report on that?
Certainly. We have, since in my tenure in Bridgewater, we have only used that building for storage of mostly junk. We cleaned out that building not too long ago, and the only thing that's been used for most recently is storage of materials that are being used in the LED streetlight conversion, which will soon be completed. So prior to prior to 2012, I don't believe that building has really effectively been used for anything substantive after the highway garage was completed back in the mid-1990s, I believe, early 2000s.
anything else, Mr. Wood?
That's it.
Any other questions from any counselors? All right, seeing none, I'm going to close the hearing at 7:08. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
motion and seconded. Any discussion? Mr. Wood?
Thank you. As we've heard, the building hasn't been used in quite a while, and over the years, because it is in my precinct district, I've had a number of conversations with the town manager about the building, including graffiti on the building. It seems like right now it's just a nuisance attractor. If you stop by, the window's broken and it's not in good shape, and I can't foresee any reasonable use for the building. So I'm going to vote in favor. I'm strongly in favor. I think there's better uses for the property. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wood. Mr. Gallagher?
Thank you, Mr. President. And I think this is a positive step for the community, having this old structure torn down. Whatever becomes of the plot, if you will, or land that's there underneath it, that will have, I'm sure we'll have that discussion down the road. But I brought this forward, and we talked about this several times, and I hope that it's a springboard to helping develop the Town River Landing at the end of that area. And as Stiles and Hart becomes developed as well, if those two open spaces can talk to each other, I think that this would be a great asset for the community down the road, and perhaps this space could be used for some parking or whatever, but I think this is a step in the right direction.
Thank you. Any other counselors?
I see Mr. Columbotus' hand is up.
Mr. Columbotus?
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to Mr. Dutton. Mr. Dutton, what other, in the language of the order, you cite that the uses of these funds would be for demolition of the old highway barn and for any ancillary improvements of the site. Can you give a rough breakdown as to what percent, how much the demolition itself would cost, and how much would be spent for ancillary improvements, and what those might be?
Certainly. Excuse me. Right now we have a tentative demolition estimate of about $68,000, which could, once we get into the demolition and the details, could swing one way or the other. I don't expect it to be substantially more than that. What we did when we crafted the order was we wanted to make sure. Well, at the time we had a grant application being prepared that could potentially offset some of the expense of tearing down the highway barn. So we wanted to make sure we provided as flexible language as possible, because the grant, in the event that the grant did not come through, our intent was to provide adequate space down there, make improvements to the Town River Landing, but provide adequate space, provide additional parking. So we wanted to make sure that we built into the capital order enough to be able to do some of those, what I'll call ancillary things, including, improved parking. We're going to have to fill in some holes once that building comes down. So that's essentially what that meant. I think we're at the point where we're fairly certain we will get grant funding, and we will not need any of the additional monies in this order for that purpose. But we wanted to make sure that we provide some flexibility to make sure that we don't just tear down the building and leave a scar. We wanted to improve it enough so that it could be usable and an attractive place to go. So that's basically the meaning of that language.
Can I follow up on that?
Absolutely.
So I would guess I would just urge you to not make any sort of real commitments to one specific, to keep the improvements kind of general and improvements that could be worked towards any of several future uses for the site, and to not kind of lock us into one use. Given that we have, there's been some conflicting opinions as to how that site might be used. So rather than go down one road and find that money has been spent for nothing, we should kind of hold off as much as possible.
No, I agree completely. The intent here is to make sure that the site of the actual highway, the old highway barn, is obviously demolished appropriately, but then that we don't leave a scar essentially in the in that part of town.
Right. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? All righty, this requires a roll call vote.
Mr. Fitzgibbons,
Aye.
was that a yes? Mr. Fitzgibbons, you're muted. There you go.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Columbotus,
Yeah.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
9 in favor, none against.
Okay. Before I move on to the next one, I have a procedural question for Attorney Rollins. Mr. Rollins, since the next order does have a change to it, I just want to make sure I do this in the correct manner. So my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is we'll go through the hearing process, close the hearing, and then during the motion to approve is when we can go in and motion to approve as amended, correct?
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. All right. The time is 7:14. I will open the meeting. This is in regards to Order O FY 21-009, Transfer Order, Capital Appropriation for School Funding. The Finance Committee met on July 20th, 2020 and voted 7-0 to recommend approval. At their meeting held on July 21st, 2020, the Budget and Finance Committee voted 3-0 to recommend approval. This measure has been duly advertised in the enterprise and on the town's website for a public hearing. The measure may be finally considered upon receipt of the Finance Committee's disposition, conclusion of this hearing, and consideration of the proposed amendments. Is there anyone from the general public that has any questions on this order?
I do not see any raised hands.
Okay. Is there anyone from the public speaking in favor of the order?
No raised hands that I see.
Okay. Is there anyone from the public speaking in opposition of the order?
No raised hands that I see.
Okay. Any questions from the counselors? All right. Seeing none, I will close the meeting at 7:16. I will entertain a motion to approve.
So
Motion to
moved.
approve?
Second.
Second.
I'll entertain a motion to approve as amended.
Motion to approve as amended.
I'll make a motion to amend as indicated.
As indicated. Okay, is there a second?
Second. Second.
Any discussion on the amendment? Okay, and this requires a roll call vote
That's
on
correct.
on the amendment?
Yes.
Okay,
That's correct.
we'll have a roll call vote on the amendment.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus,
Yes.
Mr. Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
9 in favor, none against.
Okay, any discussion on the main motion? Okay, this requires a roll call vote.
Mr. Fitzgibbons,
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch,
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
9 in favor, none against.
Okay, moving on, we have no license transactions. We don't have any presentations. There isn't a town manager's report. I will give the town council an opportunity, if you have anything that you want Mr. Dutton to have prepared for our August meeting, you can bring that up now or follow up with them. Okay. We do not have any discussions. Are there any committee reports? Okay, no legislation for action. We do not have any old business. We do not have any new business. Citizens' comments. Open it up again with the same expectation of the open forum. Keep it to 3 minutes. And if there's any comments in regards to what you'd like to bring up, now is the time.
Mr. Ivaldi has his hand raised.
Mr. Ivaldi.
Yes, thank you, Ann. Thank you, Mr. President. Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right, thank you. During councilor comments from your July 7th meeting, Councilor Wood made several statements that I believe deserve a response to. First, Mr. Wood said that he couldn't understand why anyone outside of his precinct would want to be involved in the recent Precinct 6 election. While it is true that precinct councilors do represent their specific precincts, it's also true that all 9 councilors conduct townwide business and vote on legislation that impacts the entire town. So it is therefore entirely appropriate and acceptable for any outside person in any given precinct to be involved in any election in town. Second, Mr. Wood mentioned that a lot of inaccurate information was shared about his tenure on the council. I do believe that at one point when Mr. Wood pulled papers over the winter, there was some confusion pertaining to his actual time on the council, but that was subsequently cleared up. As of the end of December 2019, Mr. Wood would have served 3 terms or 9 years, which began on January 2011. The charter clearly indicates that town councilor terms begin on the 2nd Monday following the town election in April, which means that had Mr. Wood not resigned, he would have served 9 years and 4 months at the time of the yearly election in April, thus making him ineligible to serve a full 3-year term, since he would have exceeded the 12-year limit. Mr. Wood therefore used the term limit loophole to create a break in his service, thus enabling him to serve another full 3-year term. Third, Mr. Wood refutes that what he did was for personal gain, which is prohibited in Section 1-8 of the Charter Ethical Standards. The definition of personal gain is anything that benefits or gives advantage to a particular person. In this case, Mr. Wood's use of the charter loophole, whether legal or not, clearly gave him the benefit of extending his tenure on the council, something which no other council member has derived benefit from. Fourth, Mr. Wood mentioned that he was criticized for being silent. It's no surprise that when someone resigns from a position and then reapplies for the same position without any explanation, it's only natural to raise questions. Mr. Wood was asked numerous times to inform the public as to the reasons for his actions, yet he chose to remain silent. It wasn't until the eve of the election that Mr. Wood finally made a statement on social media that he was running for his 4th term. Not sure why he waited so long, but if he had just been upfront and honest back in December as to his intentions, much of the confusion and controversy could have been minimized. And lastly, Mr. Wood correctly mentioned the fact that he and Councilor Columbotus were in the same position regarding term expiration. The difference, however, is that Mr. Columbotus chose to remain true to the intent of the charter and not exploit the loophole to gain himself additional time on the council. Let's hope that moving forward, any additional charter issues will be cared for and resolved before another controversy comes up, and that all future elected officials will respect and uphold the intent and spirit of our town constitution. Thank you.
Are there any other comments? Ann, do you see anybody?
I do not.
Okay, I'll move on to, excuse me, councilor comments. I will start with Mr. Fitzgibbons.
None, thank you.
Mr. Columbotus.
Nothing tonight, thanks.
Mr. Souza.
Nothing, sir.
Mr. Rushton.
Nothing tonight.
Mr. Wood.
Thank you. Couple quick comments. As many of you know, we have completed the purchase of the 5 acres adjacent to Stoughton Hart project park. And last week, the town manager and our economic developer / planner hosted a meeting that was great. We now have a working group to work through some of the items leading into the next phase of the project. And we'll need volunteers and such for some trash cleanup, trail work, and things like that. We don't have a definitive plan yet, but we're starting to put one together. So that's a very positive news. Many of you have now seen that the property on Broad Street is going to be before the planning board. I won't comment directly on that. I think that there will be a couple items that need to come before the council, but I do think that as a cornerstone of the central business district and downtown, that it creates a unique opportunity for revitalization that we haven't seen in a long time. And I'm optimistic that it goes forward. So we'll keep our eyes out on that news. And then finally, about the charter review. So I'd like to let you all know that I've requested to give a presentation before the Charter Review Committee. As a committee chair and member of the Rules and Procedures Committee for years, I've spent maybe about 200 hours on the admin code and prior charter change attempt, including organizing several public educational meetings about the prior recommended changes voted on by the full council. I'm a subject matter expert on all aspects of the change. I supported all the changes the council voted on to send to the voters, and not just one as some might believe. As you know, Ed Evaldi is the new chair of the Charter Review Committee and has had issues with my rejoining council. I hope he will do the right thing and respond favorably to my request. Thank you.
Mr. Chase.
No comment this evening.
Mrs. Loesch.
No comments tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Gallagher.
Nothing tonight. I think you all
I
want
see
to go home.
I see Mr. Gallagher's looking at the clock. So I just want to end it real quick with this. This will be the second year that we've had to go through a special meeting for capital appropriations. I fully expect not to visit this next year at the same time. Thank you very much. We do not have an executive. Whoa! We don't have an executive session. I hear a motion to adjourn.
Second.
So moved.
Okay, this requires a roll call vote.
Mr. Gallagher,
Yes.
Mrs. Loesch,
Yes.
Mr. Chase,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. George,
Yes.
Mr. Rushton,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Columbotus,
Yes.
Mr. Fitzgibbons,
Yes.
9 in favor, none against.
All right.
Thank you again,
Thank you very much. Everyone have a great night.
Thank you.
As well.
Evans, are you still there a minute?